Good morning, everyone. I am a retired clinical psychiatric psychotherapist from Long Island, New York, and I've been working with TLCs since the very beginning, and I enjoy this work tremendously. I lost my husband 5 years ago, and I am all alone in Florida as far as relatives go. And I have made a few good friends. And making friends at our age is not the easiest thing. It's not like making the friends that we made 40 and 50 years ago. Friendship at this time, if we're really honest with ourselves, is different. It's based on different things and different needs, but we certainly can have good relationships. And as we've been working on these relationships, along comes something called a pandemic. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. March 11, 2020, the day normal died. There are decades when nothing happens. And then there are weeks when decades happened, and that's what happened last year. This pandemic was said to be the first in 100 years, the first since the 1900s, when after the Spanish-American War and the Spanish-American flu came to the United States, we had what was called the American flu. And at that point, gauze facial masks were used, the same that were basically the same that we are using today. Not very much changed in that area. But then I thought about what happened in the 1980s. Another word came about. I didn't know the word COVID, but in the 1980s, I didn't know another scary word, and that word was AIDS. Wasn't AIDS a pandemic? We all got terrified. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know where it started. But life went on, and we've coped. And now AIDS is just another word in our vocabulary. So what I'd like you to do before we continue is I'd like you to take your right hand to your left hand, whichever one is dominant, and I'd like you to pat yourself on your opposite shoulder for what you have done for yourself to cope for getting through the last 13 months, because you have done that one way or the other. You have overcome isolation and loneliness, and you will continue to do so as we move forward, as individuals, as groups. How many times in the past years and years did things happen? How many times were there blackouts and you calmly went and got flashlights, batteries, candles? Did you tell the children calmly to play a board game, Monopoly, Yahtzee, Uno? Depending on where you lived, the power maybe was out for a week. I lived on Long Island. It was very common for the power to go out for a week. My children were born before Pampers. All I did was hope that I had done enough laundry and I had enough cloth diapers to last until the power went on. What about the blackout of 1964 that took out the whole East Coast of the country? The Midwest and up north, power outages, tornadoes, heavy rain, snow. We were just talking before we started about up north, still freezing weather, snow, while we here down in Florida are enjoying beautiful sun, warm weather. We forget other people in the world are coping with many different things along with this pandemic. Hurricane season seems to start earlier, last longer. We somehow cope. Hurricane Dorian a few years ago took out the Bahamas. I have friends who have owned a home on the Bahamas for years, totally, completely destroyed. They're coping. Life goes on. They said never in their lifetime are they going to be able to return to that home. This talk is not to bring us down, but to address reasons why being alone during COVID has triggered such a wide range of emotions. When the government decided to shut down, did anyone ever imagine that it would last so long? A little vacation was nice. I thought maybe I would work on decluttering, get rid of the 6,000 emails I had at that time, even though I live alone, maybe try some new recipes, call some old friends. I did that. I called people I hadn't talked to in a long time. It could never last this long. Could we imagine businesses closing, people losing everything they had, bankruptcies, homes being foreclosed on, more people homeless, cars repossessed, running out of toilet paper? Who could ever imagine the thought of running out of toilet paper? And then we were faced with political unrest on our land, riots, protests. You put the TV on, and every day now, somewhere, somebody is being killed on our land. Did that ever happen before, such violence? You channel surf, people channel surf, and they come away with too many opinions. They don't know who to believe. But to me, Walter Cronkite is just on a long overdue vacation. Maybe we need to remember his words. And that's the way it is, folks. That's the way it is. We have to join together. COVID has triggered a raft of losses: life, health, wealth, relationships, identity, mobility, tradition, in many ways, causing people to question, who am I now? You'll find out again. You'll come out stronger, wiser. You'll feel good about yourself, that you came through this. You may use the term, I survived COVID. There are all kinds of buttons now. I survived this, I survived that. My grandchildren gave me socks for my last birthday. I survived COVID. Well, I guess I did. 100 years ago, a psychologist named William James coined a phrase, psychological functioning. He observed that during times of crises, during surge of stress hormones, people reacted in noticeable different ways. Some, to use what I brought into today's uh, actions, would be somebody who would say, okay, I have this time, I'm going to do something positive and work to lose weight that they hadn't before, perhaps finished an education, a college education, worked on creating a more positive relationship, maybe even became engaged. I've fallen in love again. Didn't think that was going to happen in my life. While others have put on unwanted weight, have become couch potatoes, um, lost money, online shopping, went into debt, and created chaos in personal relationships. Grief. We've all been exposed to grief, all kinds of grief. The loss of a business, grief. I have lost 12 people in this last year. One of my friends died in less than 24 hours after being diagnosed with COVID. I was in shock, but I wasn't the only one that happened to. Many, many people. Look at the first responders, yet they do it every day. PTSD is now being termed CPTSD, COVID post-traumatic stress disorder, but they go out there and they keep doing it. Not because they want to, because they feel they have to. They want this country to go on. They want to bring us back to some kind of normalcy. I said they didn't want to. Yes, they want to, but they want to not because they're enjoying it, but they want to help other people come through this. I said, I'm sorry, COVID PTSD. We also have complicated grief now. But the way to come through this is by living. We must go on and we must live. Yes, we will play again. Yes, we will laugh again. But sometimes we have to go through the pain to come back to that point. Sometimes we can't have fun until the hard part is done. But we must feel that we are working towards something. Life is a gift. Yesterday is gone. We hope tomorrow will come. And today is what we have. It sounds very simplistic, I know, but it's necessary to drive the point home. We're lonely. Loneliness occurs. It occurs when people feel they don't have anyone with whom to share their joys or the hardships of life. Some have even compared this isolation created by COVID to the solitary confinement in prison. Can you imagine comparing this illness to such severe punishment? Why would someone say that? What did I do to deserve this? Can you see that? Do you feel that you've been punished? Or do you just feel that this is another part of life? As I said, AIDS in the 1980s, 100 years ago, a pandemic. Are we supposed to learn something from this? Come out stronger? What about planning? Are you planning? Have you planned a vacation? Are you planning to see your relatives? I'm going up north next week. I haven't seen a couple of my grandchildren in 2 years. I haven't seen my sons in 16 months. I'm very excited. I have a vacation planned for the end of April. I'm going, well, that's next week. And I have another one planned for the end of May. I'm going to Cape Cod. I'm going to Long Island. And yesterday I received a phone call from a friend on Long Island telling me she has a convention to go to in Orlando, February 2022. And after she spends 2 days in Orlando, can she come and spend a week here in the villages? Of course, I said yes. Do we know what's going to happen next February? No, but we have to plan. Life has to go on. Hopefully, this pandemic will have eased. Most of the adults are being vaccinated now. The government, and we have to try to believe again in the government, is saying that by the end of the year, hopefully, children will have been vaccinated. Hopefully, life will return to some degree of normalcy. Empathy. Too many people lack empathy, and the lacking of empathy can lead to loneliness. It's oftentimes very difficult to put ourselves in other people's shoes. I'm going to tell you a short story about empathy. My late mother-in-law was a very bright, educated woman, but she lacked empathy. She adored her husband. My late father-in-law was a dentist. She tried to protect him. She never wanted him to be exposed to too much pain. And in the latter years of his life, he was in a nursing home. There was no diagnosis. I guess it was old age. She wanted everybody in the nursing home to address him as Dr. Lowett. She had a very, very funny way of saying doctor. It sounded like it had 3 different syllables. I can't say it the way she did, but it was like doctor. And there was another patient in the facility. The man probably suffered with some kind of Parkinson-like syndrome. And he would walk around the facility all day, and his arms were in a very stiff position, almost like the toy soldiers from the Rockettes of New York Radio City Music Hall, if you had ever seen them doing their marching dance. But she never wanted my father-in-law to see this man. She didn't know what was wrong with him, and she projected that it would upset my father-in-law. She lacked empathy. And I said to her, Mom, maybe this man too was a dentist, a surgeon, a lawyer, a judge, an Indian chief. And I didn't know if she was listening to me or not. Well, one day, some relatives came to see my father-in-law. The husband sat down to talk with my father-in-law, the wife with my mother-in-law. And when the man came walking by, the wife said to my mother-in-law, "What's wrong with that man?" And my mother-in-law said, "Shh, Joan said we shouldn't ask. Who knows what's wrong with the man? We don't know his backstory." I was shocked. Empathy? Had my mother-in-law heard me? And I was pleased. So we all need to have empathy for others, and where we can, we need to help. And compassion for others as well as for ourselves. Not feeling sorry for ourselves, but learning to understand that not everything is in our control, especially COVID. Exercise, getting to move your body. Maybe you haven't been able to go to the classes you used to. Maybe you haven't been able to get out of your house. Even if you just slide the door to your lanai and sit outside and get some vitamin D, some vitamin A, breathe in the fresh air. I'd like to take a moment and talk to you about a man whose name was Moshe Feldenkrais. He was a Russian Ukrainian. He was a physicist. And at one point in his life, he got very, very sick and he was confined to bed. He saw the body as a machine. He couldn't move much of his body. And he was known as the founder of the Feldenkrais Method, a way of increasing self-awareness through movement. His Feldenkrais theory is that thought, feeling, perception, and movement are closely interrelated and influence each other. And I used to teach yoga, and I would teach his method. He would lie there in bed, and he would slowly concentrate on a finger. And he would concentrate on moving that one finger. And in time, he would get it to move. And then he would think of moving another finger. He wasn't paralyzed, but he had an illness where it was getting harder and harder for him to move. And slowly, he was able to move his body. And he taught this movement, these exercises, to other people in the most positive way that he could. And I taught this in an exercise program where people too often focused on what they weren't able to do instead of what they were able to do. And this is what we have to focus on. What have you been able to do during the last 13 months? Not worry what you weren't able to do. Make sure you're eating enough. Make sure you're sleeping enough. Make sure you're not comparing your life to others. Your life is yours, no one else's. It's your life to live. It's your life to learn about feeling good about who you are. It helps when you are in touch with yourself. I would like to do an exercise on gratitude, maybe perhaps a little different than other exercises you've done on gratitude. If you would, with me, get comfortable in your seat, close your eyes, roll your shoulders up, back, down, and relax them. Take some deep breaths through your nose. Hold the inhalation as long as you possibly can. Take that inhalation down to the lowest lobes of your lungs. Make it a cleansing breath so that when you exhale, you're cleansing your lungs of all impurities. Do that again. Breathe deeply. Another breath. Visualize your heart. See your heart beating. See the blood flowing through your ventricles, your veins, the arteries, the chambers of your heart. Watch your heart pump. See this as your life force. Be grateful. Be grateful that you are alive. Watch the blood flow through your heart. Know that this is your center. This is your life force. This is your energy. Without it, you wouldn't be here. Your gratitude must start in your heart center, and then you let it flow through you. You let it flow out. You let it flow to all who you come in contact with. One more deep cleansing breath. Inhale deeply. Exhale as slow as you can. Sitting up as straight as you can. Opening your eyes slowly. Blinking several times. Thinking about your gratitude. Perhaps you're grateful to somebody who called you during COVID, somebody you hadn't spoken to in a long time. Maybe you're grateful to a neighbor who knocked, somebody who left a meal at your front door, somebody who sent you a card. Grateful that you're alive. Grateful that the sun is shining this morning. Grateful that you can move. Grateful that you're vaccinated. Grateful that your family is vaccinated. Grateful that we're getting through this. I am. I appreciate being invited here this morning. I hope I've said something positive, that even though we may be alone in our homes, we're not alone. Even though you may feel lonely, remember you're not alone. There are many people out there who care for you, maybe an email away, maybe a telephone call away, and there will be an end in sight to this. And again, you can pat yourself on the back for being here this morning, for everything you've done to help yourself cope, for helping other people get through. I thank you for inviting me. And if anybody has any questions or any comments, I'm here.
Thank you so much, Joan. I'm going to wait for people to either write a question or raise their hand for a question, but I've got a couple questions I'd like to start with. Can you give us some more examples of how people can take care of themselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am a type 2 diabetic. I've had a couple of times, as a matter of fact, this past weekend, that I ate too much sugar. I felt it right away. I know that if I don't take my medicine and if I don't eat properly, I am going to feel it. So everybody must make sure they have their medication in the house, they see their doctors, they're tested, whatever it is. Whatever it is, if you have an eye problem, a heart problem, a sugar problem, or if you just need to have your 6-month physical, make sure you do it. And especially during COVID, I think it's very important, of the times that we weren't able to get out, to make sure you have enough medication in the house. And make sure you eat properly.
Yep. And one of the things that we're finding is sometimes, again, isolation, loneliness, get pushed too far. And sometimes it's important to seek out professionals, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to say that, because I think therapists have been one of the most busy people during this time. And that's who TLCs are. We are therapists. We do volunteer. Our services are at no charge, and there are other professionals in the villages. It's very important. And there are many people who've never sought the help of a therapist.
Yep. So as we're working through isolation and even trying to keep ourselves safe, even after we've had the vaccine, right? And all of a sudden you come along in a situation where maybe people around you aren't safe, such as wearing a mask. Do you have any suggestions on how we can approach that situation? Again, trying to keep ourselves safe.
2 weeks ago, I was with, I'm sorry. Didn't expect that. 2 weeks ago, I was out for dinner outside. All of a sudden, it started to rain, and the people I was with all went into the restaurant. No one was masked. It was extremely crowded. Mea culpa. It wasn't until we were being served that I realized the mistake I had made. First time since COVID, I was in a restaurant, very crowded. No one had a mask on. I'm never going to do that again while we're under this situation. If I was in another situation where I was wearing a mask and nobody else was wearing a mask, I would ask somebody to put on a mask if they didn't mind. And if they did mind, I would have to leave.
Thank you for that. So another question, can you speak a little bit more about the Moston, I'm sorry, I'm slaughtering the name, the technique that you were talking about?
Moshe Feldenkrais.
Yep, sorry, I'm trying to pronounce it and I'm
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I taught yoga, I taught many variations, especially to, at that point, people with back problems. So it was done on the mat or in a chair, and it was started very slowly at the top of the head, observing the body. It could be done anywhere in one's own home, but slowly observing what part of the body hurts. And slowly, his technique was to observe your body and try slowly to move that part of the body, connect that part of the body with the rest of the body and with the breath, and telling your body, we will be better. We will move again. And he thought, as I said, of the body as a machine. If you oiled the body and took care of the machine, oiled the machine, oiled the body, fed the body well. And slowly he got his body up out of bed and walking again. And that's how he took care of his machines and his body. As I said, it sounds extremely simplistic, but it wasn't. And he was very well known in Israel and across Europe. And it became a yogic technique, the Feldenkrais Method. So again, for people who are just sitting in a chair and can't move, even if all you're doing is trying slowly to drop your head and feeling the pain in the back of your neck, focusing on where and trying with your breath exhaling to lower your head even more. You become aware of where your pain is. To the side, lifting your arms, I said, one finger at a time. Just becoming aware, integrating mind, body, breath. And that's how he helped fix his body. So you can read about it. He was a very interesting man, a physicist. He won many prizes. He wrote many papers. he lived a very long life.